This is probably my favorite part of Smart Objects, is incorporating Camera Raw into the equation. So let's take a look at the way before Smart Objects, the way things worked in Camera Raw. So here in Mini Bridge I have a raw file. I double click on it, which switches me to Camera Raw. I can't quite see the whole thing because it just refuses to scale down to the size that I'm working on. But down at the bottom we click on the workflow options. It says Adobe RGB and a whole bunch of information. When I click on that, it gives me various options, including how big do I want it to be, which is all I'm going to do for now. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that I change the temperature of this photo a little bit, and I click Open Image. So now it's going to apply whatever settings that I did in Camera Raw and open that document in Photoshop as a regular document. So I can start working on this and doing other things, but if there's anything I notice at this point that I want to edit in Camera Raw, my only option, frankly, is to close this document and start again. So I'd have to close it, go back to Bridge, and open it again to make further changes in Camera Raw. But what I'm going to do this time instead is down at that bottom area that I apologize you can't see right at the moment, which is where it says Adobe 1998 8-bit and the size. When I click on that, that brings up this thing called Workflow Options. You'll see at the bottom there is an option that says Open in Photoshop as Smart Objects. Now, the reason it's Smart Objects plural is because this is the Adobe's way of saying from now on, every time I open a raw file, open it in Photoshop as a smart object. What does that mean exactly? Well, you'll see when I click the Open Object button, now it still applies the settings, but look what's happened. That famous little symbol that we like so much, that Smart Object symbol, has now applied here. So, as an example, let's apply a filter to this. Let's do our Gaussian blur, blur it quite a bit, and then on the mask, we'll take our paintbrush, black, make a nice big brush, and just click where we don't want the soft focus effect to be applied, like this. So now I have a nice effect starting, but at this point, if I suddenly go, oh, wait a minute, I meant to do something different in Camera Raw, not a problem anymore, because in the first example, as soon as I clicked OK in Camera Raw, I was done. But now, the smart part of this smart object is it has a link back to the original Camera Raw file. So if I double click on it, it doesn't open a new document like other smart objects do. It goes back to the original Camera Raw file. So now, for example, I could, let's do something very obvious, lower the exposure. In fact, let's do this to make it really obvious. Let's go in here and convert it to a grayscale just to see. Oops, I turn it back off again. Let's just do a few little settings in here. And I'm going to say for now that I'm okay with that, so I click OK. It updates the smart object with the new Camera Raw settings, but still keeps the smart filter. And this can be an ongoing situation. So if I realize maybe I don't want that after all, I come back here and turn off, convert to grayscale, and instead come back here and just really change the temperature. Again, I'm just doing this so you can see, because you wouldn't hopefully actually do this. But that's kind of the point, is you have the ability to, because now it's a completely live. Actually, that's not too bad. I kind of like that. And that's the beauty of it, is you can experiment, because you're no longer tied to, well, once I click open in Camera Raw, I'm stuck, because you're not stuck. You always have this ability. As you've seen, you can still do the same things, smart filters. Now, the only exception that you have to think about, as we talked about briefly before, and I was talking about things you can't do to a smart object. For example, if I added a new layer above and use the clone stamp tool or the healing brush to do something, it'll work initially because I'm putting it on a new layer, but then the problem becomes if I edit the original Camera Raw file and change the temperature dramatically. Let's change it to flash, something like that, and click OK. Now it's going to update the smart object, but as you can see, it does not update the new layer with the cloning or healing, whatever you've done. That's just something to keep in mind, that you probably want to save things like healing, cloning, anything of that nature till the end. But again, the very cool part is that this creates a direct link, a two-way street, as I like to call it, back and forth between Photoshop and Camera Raw, allowing you to do things like smart filters and everything else, but always with the ability to go back and edit the original. And later on, we'll see some examples where you can, again, take this up a notch with some of the ways you can play with multiple smart objects and Camera Raw.